Hey, welcome to Schurtz Ties, a culture and education podcast. I'm Casey Schurtz.
And I'm Brian Miller.
Brian, what do we got going today?
Today we have a guest, a pretty great guest. His name is Pete Hall. He is a nationwide educator who tours the country, probably even the world, helping schools be better, do it better. And we had the pleasure, our school district had the pleasure of having him in person over the summer. And he just struck a chord with me in terms of a similar heartbeat, a similar passion for people, and very, very intelligent man. And texted with him a couple different times and finally got him scheduled to come on our show. So Pete Hall, man, he's just a good guy.
Yeah, he brings a lot of knowledge, and it's graceful and it's thoughtful, and it's really impressive. He's a super smart guy, and he has a lot to offer. So it was a real pleasure to have him on the show.
Yeah, graceful. He brings hard truths with an element of grace. So I appreciate that description. That's good. So all right, without further ado, Mr. Pete Hall.
Brian, there you are.
Hey, good morning, Brian.
Morning, Pete.
How are you doing?
Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. What's happening?
No, everything's fine. Casey, do you have the winter storm that we do?
No, you getting a lot of snow?
A little bit of snow, but a lot of ice.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's my 30-minute drive turned into roughly an hour drive.
Oh, gosh, that sounds like fun.
Well, it's not
Yeah,
terrible,
actually-
but it's like in the pitch black in the middle of nowhere, so it just makes it a little bit more like nerve-wracking.
Yeah, a little hairy, white knuckle driving. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, good morning.
Yeah, good morning to you.
I interrupted you guys' conversation. What were you chatting about? You're already changing the world without me?
Yeah, we were pretty much done with the interview.
recording, and there you go. I like that.
Well,
Good, good.
thanks for letting me join at the tail end here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know you know Casey at least a little bit now, but him and I have been good friends for damn near 15 years.
Okay.
And so this is quite a joy that we get to do this together. And now we get to bring on some fantastic people like you. Casey, Pete came in and did a workshop for our district, all our district leaderships over the summer, I think, or right before school started.
August.
Yeah. And I just, connected with him. I appreciated his thoughts, his ideas of education and leadership. And then, anyway, I'm just glad he's here. So, Pete, we just come right out of the gates, man. So I have a question for you already.
Okay.
And I think when I introduced you or I invited you, you are allowed to talk about whatever you want to talk about. Some things that
Okay.
you are wrestling with, some new ideas, some whatever it might be. But I also know that you care deeply about leadership and education. And obviously, if you care about education, you care about people. And so on the way in, a question came to mind.
Okay.
And I'd love to have you put some flesh to it. So, as we oftentimes do on long drives, we as parents think about our own kids, and we, worry about them or pray for them or whatever it might be. And so, on the way in this morning, I was considering and praying for my oldest son. He just got one of his more exciting letters of acceptance last night to LSU.
Well, congratulations.
And he just it kind of just got him excited, but then it puts into finality that, we have a couple months left with our son. And a phrase came to mind, and I want you to put some wisdom behind it, assuming that all that I think is really good and really smart and true.
Okay.
But I need you to put some flesh to it. The phrase that came to mind was, Lord, give my son courage to lead and the courage to be led. And I'm assuming that that's true, but as leaders, whatever capacity that is, whether it be teachers, administrators, just people in general, we oftentimes assume that it's courageous to be the leader, and we applaud that and we put the spotlight on that. But I think it's equally, if maybe not at times more so, courageous to be led. Can you make that sound better than what it does?
Well, you know what? It's honest is what it is. And that's when you talk about leadership, you talk about people, honesty is the number one trait, right? Like you got to be real about it. And part of being real about it is exactly what you're talking about, is acknowledging the fact that you're not always going to be the leader. You're not always going to be the expert. You're not always going to be in front. And for people who thrive being in front and thrive, taking the initiative and gathering people together and galvanizing folks to take action, it can be really empowering to also empower others to take that lead and to be those leaders, and or just to fall in line sometimes. I mean, sometimes one of the best things we can do is follow somebody else who knows more than we do, who knows better than we do. And that's part of the humility of leadership, is also understanding when you've kind of maxed out what you know and what you can do. And the greatest leaders that I've ever worked with are not folks who lead all the time in everything. They're folks who they understand what their role is, and they understand what their position is, and they understand what their opportunities are to lead other people. And I think what you're talking about is spot on as far as taking the opportunities to lead and taking the opportunities to follow and to bask in other people's excellence and expertise and their guidance. Because there's an expression that I love, and I don't know if I shared this with you, Brian, when I was with you this summer. Beware the traveler who believes he has arrived. And I think there's something about the journey, and there's something about the act of becoming as opposed to believing you are. So,
Did you come up with that phrase, or because it
no, I
sounds
don't know where I
very?
got it. I heard it somewhere along the way, and you know how these things kind of just pop into your head, and then they sit there in some nook, and they eventually find their way out. And I don't remember exactly where it came from. Probably could ask ChatGPT. See exactly where that originated.
I like
Pete,
it.
I'm going to jump in here. It's very early. Brian's going to be upset by this. But actually, that statement is one. So, I had mentioned that I'm an instructional coach. Probably the most challenging person to work with is the one who believes that he or she has arrived and that they are already as good as it gets, nothing more to learn. Do you
That's
have
what
some
Casey is to me, Pete. So just know that
Yeah,
he
right.
might be speaking hypothetically, but this is my
yeah,
experience.
Okay.
this is all in quotation marks. Like, let's say for pretend that a person feels that way. Now,
Yeah, I have a friend who.
right, exactly. Uh, what how do you engage with a person who believes they have arrived and get them to be a little more reflective and consider some other options?
That's a really good question, because one of the things, first of all, I feel sad sometimes when people don't feel like they have any more room for growth, that there's nothing they could possibly do better, they couldn't possibly improve at all. I feel sad for that, because especially in education, because here we are in a position of impact and leverage, and kids' lives are hanging in the balance. And we're saying, well, there's nothing I could possibly do better. But we got a room full of kids, we got a school full of kids that all need more, and they all need different, and they all need better. So we have to, in this profession, be oriented towards continuous growth. We have to be interested in learning, and we have to be curious about ways that we can impact the world and impact our kids in a more profound manner. I feel for you, Casey, because that's real, right? How do we do it then? Well, that's the question. Is I believe everybody has a leverage point. Everybody has a pressure point. Everybody's got a trigger. Everybody's got something that they want to do, or a question that they haven't answered yet, or a challenge they haven't overcome. I believe everybody's got something. And as an instructional coach, a lot of our responsibility is finding out what that is and listening, right? And so I work a ton with leadership, and I work a ton with instructional coaches. And one of the things that we tend to have in common in that field is this need to prove ourselves and to prove our expertise. So we do a lot of talking. In Brian's question, he asked me a minute ago, is could you add wisdom to this? And that's the danger, is thinking that I have to add wisdom to this in a conversation with a teacher. So a lot of what we really ought to be doing is listening and exploring and watching and paying attention to our teachers to find out what is it that actually drives you. Because then we use that to say, okay, so if that's something that's interesting to you, if that's something that you really want to learn about, if that's something you want to get better, or you want to solve this thing that's happening in your classroom and fix it, well, I can help you with that. And we, as coaches, as leaders, we partner with our people to help them solve the problems that are meaningful to them. So we have to find out what that is, right?
Do you have a couple of good questions to ask to start leading someone down that path?
Yeah, what do you care
Go-to
about?
questions?
Is a good question.
I got buckets of questions. That's what I do. It's all about reflective questions. Actually, I have a tool, and I'm just going to flash it up here for you. If I can find out where I put it. It's called the reflective cycle. And that's the predictable pattern of thinking that we all go through as we progress towards expertise or learn something new or improve our practice. And that it is a mindset. It's a mental model. It's the way we orient our brains. And what I've got is this little tool here that, are you recording video too, or is this just audio?
Yeah. Video
Okay, if
also.
we got video, no one can read what's on there, but we got this tool. The first step in the entire process is to identify what is your goal. So questions like, what is your goal? What is interesting to you? What are you curious about? What is something that keeps you awake at night? What is the thing in your classroom that if you could change it to make it better, what is that thing? What would that be? What would you like to do more effectively? What do you wish your kids knew how to do better? Whatever that is, we start with questions like that to identify, well, what is it? And then we unpack it a little bit. So questions like, well, why is that important to you? When did you first realize that was something that was kind of stuck in your craw? How did that become a pressing issue for you? And here's the next really challenging thing for us as leaders is once you ask those questions, zip it, right? Listen and try to hear what the person is actually telling you back as far as what is important to them and why it's important to them and where this came from and how important is it. Because when you've got that information, that allows you to then say something to the effect of, well, would you be okay with me helping you with that? Are you interested in getting some support? Because I'm here to support teachers. How can I support you?
I like that question a lot. Why is it important to you, with the follow-up of where does it come from? That's a very origin story sort of question where you get to know a lot about the person. Obviously, you get to know about their passions and their desires for the classroom. But if you can ask the question, where does that come from? I'm assuming there will be an experience that they've had or a teaching that they'll reference. My dad always believed that, or my first principal always taught me. Right? There will be some sort of origin story that I think, and they might not have it on the tip of their tongue, but it might take some time for these questions to come out and to find some clarity. But when we begin to truly dig deeper into the person that we're working with, man, that builds trust, that builds community, and then ultimately that allows you to build something of worth. So I love that question.
Yeah, and I think there's another piece of that too, is that we build an understanding of what we have in common with people. And one of the things that we face as instructional coaches or as administrators is we tend to look at folks and we say, well, how well are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And a lot of times we go into classrooms and we see folks, we think this person's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we create unintentionally, because we're all good human beings and by nature, we believe the best in people. We go and we start to think we have some negative thoughts. We make some judgments about folks. When we really truly ask those questions and sit and listen to the responses, we start to realize how much we have in common with folks, and that these are actually really good people who are doing the best they can with what they've got, and they're struggling with something. They're having a hard time with something, that this is a real challenge for them. And I'm sure it's as frustrating for them as it is for us most of the time. And when we can kind of see that, that's when we saddle up next to them and we amble up beside them and we say, okay, I'm here to ride. Let's go.
So Pete, I know, Casey, you have a question, and you can.
It's okay.
What do you do when you dig a little deeper to these origin stories and you ask these questions of like, what's important to you, and what is revealed is not great?
Actually,
What?
that was going to be my question. And let me give an example. I think one of the things I struggle with as we try to approach behaviors in a different way is a lot of teachers are attached to the punishment cycle. And so, Brian, that was exactly my question, is what happens when you discover something that is like in this case, I believe strongly that the punishment cycle is unhealthy and that we have to just get rid of that concept. But it's at the heart of what some of our adults want to do.
Yeah.
So there's a half step back that we're going to have to take in just a minute, but I'll tell you what you do in the moment, and then I'm going to give you the half step back of something you should have already done. So that what you do in the moment is, it's kind of a two-part conversation. So the first part was, in a sense, the help me understand part. So help me understand your mindset. Help me understand your decision making. Help me understand what's going on in your classroom. Help me understand what's important to you, whatever that help me understand is. And then when they tell you the thing, and if it kind of raises a red flag or the antenna go up or whatever, your follow-up phrase is, well, let me help you. And it's, let me help you understand what our expectations are. Let me help you understand what my expectations are for you. Let me help you understand what we're trying to do here with kids. And we reiterate the expectations, we reiterate the standards, we reiterate the protocol or the policy or the practice or whatever it is. We reiterate. So the half step back is you can only reiterate something you've already talked about. So the half step back is what have we done to build and to co-construct a common understanding of what are our expectations for kids? What are our expectations for how we're going to respond to certain behaviors? What are our expectations for how we're going to collaborate and communicate with each other about what's going on in our classrooms? When we So the half step back is this is stuff that we probably ought to do in the spring, really, before the next school year, and then revisit it in August, right before the school year starts with new staff and whatnot.
So
At
can I ask
some
a question for Casey on that? I'm going to interrupt you because I'm thinking as a principal, I can take ownership of that. If I'm in a conversation and clearly in this getting to know you, how can I help you? How can I help you or help me understand? It's becoming clear to me that I did not do a good job communicating our expectations and policies and whatever. I can own that and I can kind of backtrack and make some decisions. But teachers or Casey, at times, Casey, I'm making this up. So just tell me if this is, and I'm using you as an example. But Casey, let's say, has a conviction. And I know Casey has strong convictions, and I think that they are good convictions of leadership, of education, of working with kids. But if he walks into this conversation, he's discovering the policy isn't there, the clarification isn't there. Or maybe it is there, but it's wrong, right? Like it's not the best direction. How does a guy like Casey then say, how can I help you or let me help you understand when the understanding that's printed on the wall is not where they need to be going?
Well, then what you have is you've got what's the expression for the failure to communicate. So what we need is alignment in that case. So in that case, our response for Casey, from your perspective as an instructional coach or as a colleague who's talking to the teacher across the hall is, well, holy smokes, we all have the same end goal in mind. It sounds like we have different philosophies about how we're going to get there. It sounds like we need clarity on exactly what the expectations are for how we're going to go about doing this, because you have a belief set that's kind of leading you down a certain path, and I have a belief set that maybe it's a little bit different than that. And there are ways for both of those to coexist. We just need to figure out what the systems direction is. What is the expectation for all of us so that I can best support you in doing the work that we need to do. And when there isn't that clarity, what that is it provides us the opportunity to call for clarity.
Hmm.
And Brian, as a principal, I'm sure you're open to your staff coming to you at any given moment saying, hey, I got a question about something. I'm really kind of frustrated with this, or I'm not sure what the expectation is. And you say, holy smokes, maybe I didn't make that clear. Maybe we haven't done that together yet. That's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. And that's something that we can put on our to-do list to make sure that we get clarified for everybody, because clarity does precede competence. That's a Becky Dufour quote, by the way. Clarity precedes competence. And then Brene Brown says, clear is kind. So when we know exactly where we're going, we know exactly what our expectations are, we know exactly how we're going to go about the work, folks feel comfortable and confident in doing it. And what you're talking about is that discord between two folks who think they know what they're supposed to be doing, but they're doing it differently. And then there's the question about, well, whose mindset, whose belief set is right? And there's not always a right and wrong. And that's one of the great things about, our country. That's one of the great things about, any kind of partnership and life partnerships or friendships, is that if you have common goals, and so Brian, you and your family, you want your kid to go do awesome things and go off to college and be incredible and be amazing and be a leader and have the courage to also be led. You and your wife may have different ideas about what that actually means, right? And how to do that and how to create that environment. Same thing in our schools. We have beliefs about what our kids should be like and what we want from our kids as they graduate. There's a ton of different avenues and different pathways to get there. And who's to say which ones are right or wrong? What we do is we do the best we can with what we've got, and ideally come to some kind of agreement, some kind of compromise, so we can do that work together.
So, Pete, since we're on this idea of systems and structures, I'm gonna try to stretch you a little bit here and tell me no if this is too far. You enjoy sports, though, right? I've seen some evidence of that in your videos and
I do,
the things
yeah.
you wrote. So, do you have an example of a sports franchise who is functioning or that is functioning so well, and they're doing all these things that you talk about? And are there lessons that we as school systems could take from that? And again, if this is too far outside your thinking realm, but I thought it'd be an interesting comparison.
Yeah, so the one that comes to mind immediately is Duke basketball. And there's a couple different reasons for that. So Duke basketball has a way of doing things. And well, if you look at historically, Duke basketball has been successful year after year after year. So Duke men's basketball, University of South Carolina women's basketball, same kind of thing. But I'm going to go with Duke men's basketball for a particular reason in just a second. I'll explain what that is. So they've got success year after year after year. They do well. So there's a way of doing things. There's an accepted process that they follow at Duke University for their basketball program. Now, they had one of the best coaches of all time, Mike Krzyzewski. He retired. New coach came in. The system didn't miss a beat. They continue to be successful year after year. And here's the things that's kind of different between men's basketball and women's basketball. So many of the elite men programs shuttle their kids off to the NBA after 1 year, maybe 2 years in the program, which means there's an incredible amount and rate of turnover in the players. So you can't look at the program and say, well, they've got these great players and these well-established players, and you got your juniors and your seniors that are teaching the freshmen the way that we do things at Duke. That's not who it is that's doing it. It's the staff. It's the system itself that has created this mechanism for continuously incorporating new athletes, new players into the way they do business, and they do it at a high level and exceptionally well year after year. So I'm sure there's more to unpack there. Krzyzewski wrote a book called Leading with the Heart, which is a great resource for prospective or current leaders to read, just about the idea of, and Brian, this is kind of how you started the interview, it's about people, right? If you're leading people. You're not leading a school, you're not leading a department, you're not leading an initiative or a change effort, you're leading people through those things. And I think that's the common element that we have to keep in mind.
Can I tell a story that just came yesterday, Casey, that might answer that question as well? And LSU has never been on my radar. I don't really give two shits about LSU, but for some reason, coincidentally, two LSU kind of stories came to head yesterday. One obviously being my son, but the other one was it was a video talking about, because obviously, what's his name? Lane Kiffin was just hired as the new LSU coach, and so they're doing some videos comparing when Nick Saban was the LSU coach to the gentleman who was just fired, I forget his name, as the LSU football coach. And it said, look at these differences. And one of them was when Nick Saban was the LSU football coach, they had just beaten, I think, Alabama. They had just beaten a decent team. And he was upset. He's saying, you guys are concerned about the outcome, and you're excited that we won. I'm not worried about the outcome. I'm upset how we won. We did not play good football. And he was very frustrated at his players and at his coaches. And he's like, if you guys want to focus on the outcome, fine, focus on the outcome. I'm not worried about the outcome. I'm worried about the process. Then it was the coach that was just fired. He was frustrated with a reporter asking questions about how they played. He's like, guys, we won. What else do you want from us? We won. Don't worry about that play. It doesn't matter about that play. We won. Stop nitpicking. And obviously, Nick Saban, no matter where he goes, creates a system that is successful because he cares about the process, and then the outcome just comes after that. Obviously, he wants to be successful, but he's worried about the process getting you to the outcome, not just the outcome. And I wonder, Casey, that's maybe a secondary answer to your question of the process. I'm not a process guy. I'm not a systems guy. Casey is, but he's teaching me that the systems in the process are how you care for people. The systems in the process are how you find success. You don't choose it over people, but it is how you care for people.
And Pete, actually, since you brought that up, Brian, let me ask a follow-up. And I think part of the reason that Brian and I work together well as thought partners is because he focuses so much on the people. I focus a lot on the system. But I think that's part of, so we've talked on this show before, Pete, about education being a wicked problem, which basically means it's unanswerable. There is no answer to this problem. And I think a lot of it is to that point you just made, which is Duke basketball has a system in place so that the people can come and leave, and the next one comes and leaves, and the system stays strong. But the system is focused on the people. What is that balance? How do you create that balance between both this functioning system and properly caring for the people?
Well, I think what you continuously do is you fold the people into the system, right? And our focus is on human development, human capital, because that is our number one asset. And as you have an effective system, You continuously fold folks into, hey, these are the things that work well. The other thing that we do, and we have the benefit of doing this from a education standpoint, is when we hire new people, we look for the folks who have the traits and the assets that we think will strengthen our team and strengthen our process and strengthen our systems. So if we're savvy about it and we're strategic about it, we're continuously selecting people that help to make us a little bit better. Meanwhile, we're developing the people that we already have to make the systems and processes a little bit better as well. I think that, a comprehensive look at leadership would tell you do both. To use middle school vernacular, yeah, 6, 7. Yeah. So you do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You're there, and you said a second ago, there's no answer to this. I would dispute that. I would say there's a bazillion answers to this.
I think that's what the problem is.
What there isn't is
too many answers.
There's not one answer that works in any given circumstance. We have to find the combination of answers that works. Our pal John Hattie over in New Zealand, who did visible learning and the mega meta-analysis of what works in schools, he even says everything works in the right context, in the right situation, delivered properly. It'll work for some kids. There is nothing that works for everyone, but there's something that works for everyone. And that's the confounding part of this work, is figuring out what is it.
Pete, what question were you trying to solve when you started Education Hall? What was your focus?
Well, how do we do this better? I mean, I can't think of a bigger question or a more appropriate question in education, but how do we do this better? How do we do it better for kids? And Brian, you brought up earlier about your kid. So I got 3 kids, and now I have a granddaughter. And my first son, when he was growing up, this is a quick story. First son, when he was growing up, like, we wanted him to be all state and everything, and he's going to go to an Ivy League school, and he's going to be the top of the class. And that didn't work out, but he did give us a beautiful granddaughter. My second kid, I was like, do really well, stay in school, do your best, Third kid comes up, and I'm like, just don't get caught. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't get arrested. It's going to be fine. It's going to work out. So then everything changed, though, when we had our granddaughter. So my son and his wife had a baby. She's now 2. And my metric has changed as far as, what I want for her. And it really is, are you happy? Are you at peace with who you are as a human being? Are you interested in things? Are you curious about life? Are you nice? Are you friendly? Are you kind? So I have totally different metrics to determine success. And so my view has shifted. I'm no longer a sitting principal. I'm just a crawling around on the floor grandfather. The metric has changed as far as the question I want to answer. Kind of. It's really the same question. How do we do it better? I think the answers have changed, but the question remains the same. How do we do this better for kids, for communities? And, also the thing that I want to bring up is we need to remember why we're doing this in the first place. And so often we get stuck in the weeds of the work, and we're focused so much on the standardized test, and we're focused on grading, and we're focused on these things, and we're forgetting that we're raising kids. And we're raising kids to be grown-ups in our communities. And if they don't fit in the box and they're not doing well, we can try to cram them back in the box, or we can send them off, or we can kick them out. And the reality is, no matter what happens, they're still going to grow up and be in our communities, and they're going to be changing the tires in our car. They're going to change the oil. They're going to change the valves in our heart. They're going to be changing our diapers. And we want to have really good human beings in our communities. And I think that, from a school perspective, is something that we have to bring back into the conversation, is, are we raising good human beings?
So my follow-up question would be, that seems like such an obvious and easy, like, of course, that's why we chose education. And I can't imagine any person listening to you and saying, I disagree, right? Like, we all agree with that. So then why did we move away from it?
Well, that's a whole second conversation, gentlemen. So I'm finishing up a manuscript right now. It's called Reaching and Teaching Kids Who Don't Fit in the Box. And so I explore the history of the box. And we all know what the box is, right? The kids who perform well in the box will do well in school. Kids who come to school ready for school will perform well in the box. There's a reason that we have a box. It was created centuries ago. The first people who were had access to education were the wealthy elite males, and that came over from England here to the States, and it was to create this cadre of leaders for the new country, right? So the box has not really evolved that much. It's shape shifted just a little bit, but we've always had this box in education. American education has always been very reactive to whatever's going on around it. So the Coleman Report in the 1950s, A Nation at Risk, No Child Left Behind, all the things that we've done have all been kind of knee-jerk reactions to something as we've shifted education. And we've allowed ourselves to focus on the metrics as opposed to the kids, the humans. And yes, anyone that got an education, I think if you got an education, I sure hope you're in here for the kids. However, just because you're in there for the kids doesn't mean it's front of mind to say, I want to help make sure this kid grows up to be an amazing kid. There are elements of the system, the structure that have been kind of refined and honed to place our focus on obedience and following the rules and getting the scores and chasing the points. I mean, we still have examples all across the country of kids who are getting extra credit points for bringing in whiteboard markers or for bringing in materials to the classroom, where that has nothing to do with whether or not they learned it, but it does affect their grades, which affects their class standing and their GPAs, and it affects what college they can get into, and it affects. So there's so many bizarre things that are still happening in schools that are really not about developing kids. It's about fitting into the little box. And it's a frustrating element for all of us who do believe in wanting to raise kids, because to a certain extent, it kind of hamstrings some of the things that we would ordinarily do in the best interest of kids, because we end up making decisions based on what's in the best interest of the score.
Do you think
So
over time, sorry, Casey, can I ask one more
no,
question?
go ahead. Yeah,
Um, To use your analogy of parenting and the way your focus shifted as each kid came along, and I have 5 kids, and by the 5th kid, I mean, there's 0 expectations, right?
You've forgotten his name. Huh?
That's right. So, but I think it actually is kind of a decent analogy for education, where the longer we've gone on and the longer a teacher or a principal is in a school, they first come in with these, I'm going to change the world, I'm going to change kids' lives. And either through a faulty system or faulty system of a building or faulty system of the nation of how we perceive and react to education, they have developed more of a, I just want to show up and I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to have a hard day. And so we've shifted our mindsets to, I just want to get to the weekend. Would that be a safe or fair analysis of, I would say, a decent percentage of teachers, their hearts are in the right place. They do want to care for kids, but over time, through faulty systems and hard interactions and very difficult experiences, they've just kind of learned, I just need to survive today.
Yeah, well, if you look at the data and the research that we do that to our adults, yes, the percentage of teachers who, and we know about teacher attrition, and we know about folks leaving the profession after a certain number of years, and we know about how hard it is to recruit and retain staff. There's an interesting correlation to that, which sends off light bulbs and flares, is the research that the Gallup organization did called the engagement cliff. Is that what it's called? I think it's called the engagement cliff. The longer kids stay in school, the less engaged they are in school. And that peaks in the early elementary years and then has a steady plummet until about the junior year, and then it starts to kind of a little bit of a rebound towards the very end. And that's the moment where kids realize, oh crap, I'm going out in the world. I have to figure out if it's LSU or someplace else, what am I going to do with my life? And I have to get myself together. So they kind of come back and re-engage. It's an interesting corollary, because you start thinking about, well, gosh, the longer people stay in education, the less they like it. Right? Whether it's from the kid perspective as a student or from the grown-up perspective as a staff member, that's a devastating testimony as far as kind of what are we doing in education. So there are things that obviously we need to change. There's way, and it's again, like Casey said, there's no answer to this, because we have to have some kind of metric to gauge whether or not we're doing a good job. And it's really hard to gauge it by, well, how's this kid? Right? I mean, the quantitative measures of standardized tests and all that is easy to look at and to gauge. The qualitative of how prepared is this kid? That's a whole lot more difficult. And at the local level, we feel, because we know our kids, we know our communities, we feel we could answer that question. But it's apples and oranges if we're trying to explain to somebody in Louisiana, for instance, what a kid in Montana is, if this kid is ready, it's different to say that this kid is ready and this kid's prepared and I feel confident in the skills and the personal attributes, et cetera, that this kid has. It's not as easy. You can compare standardized tests. You can't compare the qualitative measures. So, and that's the challenge is with this box we've got, we feel like we need to be able to compare kids in order to put them in the right spot.
I want to tell a quick story and then I have a question. So to your point about that engagement cliff, when we would get a ways into the school year and I felt like my students were starting to disengage and be less interested in what we were doing and really just start to act like teenagers, I would play them the song "We're Gonna Be Friends" by White Stripes. Are you familiar with that song? Right. And it's a really upbeat song and it's kids who are headed off to school and they're looking at bugs and they're having fun and they're excited to go to school. And I would play that for my students and I would ask them, what age do you think this kid is, that this narrator of the song, what grade are they in? And usually it'd be third, fourth, fifth grade. And then I'd ask him, is that kid happy to go to school? Are they enjoying school? Yeah, absolutely. They're having fun. And then the kids would start talking about, oh, I used to feel that way. And then I would ask them, well, what changed? What's different? And they almost always came to the same conclusion. They changed, the kids. And I wonder, to your point, as teachers stay in the profession longer and they are becoming dissatisfied, is it because they have changed, their attitude has changed, their perception has changed? And I guess in theory, my follow-up would be, well, what do we do for that person if the time has changed them? You talked about knowing your why, right? That's something that you brought up. And that's become a cliched phrase. Or in schools, we introduce SEL curriculum because these are the things that are going to help us raise great humans. But I can tell you, in the schools, these things are seen as hokey and silly. Yet I would argue that these might be the most important things that we do. So my question to you is, how do we integrate some of these necessary lessons and skills, like how to get along with other people, without it feeling hokey and with it feeling like a natural part of the learning process that is gearing students towards intellectual success as well as personal success?
Yeah. Well, let me go back to the know your why business real quick first. And yeah, that has kind of become cliche. And I love the memes that I see on social media. One more administrator tells me to remember my why when this kid's acting. Here's how I've kind of interpreted it. And I kind of borrow a quote from Mother Teresa, who said, "Wash the plate, not because it is dirty, nor because you were told to wash it, but because you love the person who will use it next." And how that speaks to me, that particular quote, is you have to wash the plate, right? I mean, you have to wash the plate. The question is, what spirit are you going to bring into washing the plate? How are you going to go about doing that? And I like to kind of equate this to going to a restaurant. So you go to a restaurant and you got a server helping you out at your table. We've all been to the restaurant. We've all had that dining experience where the server was clearly clocked in, doing the job, and was going to clock out at the end. And they just did their stuff and there was nothing special about it. And we've also been to a restaurant where the server's job, apparently mission, was to make sure you had the best dining experience in the history of the known universe. And fundamentally, the work that those two servers did at dinner that night was exactly the same. They came and took your order, they refilled your water, they checked on you to make sure you're doing okay, they brought you more bread, et cetera, right? The checklist of tasks was exactly the same. They washed the plate. The difference was in the spirit that they did it, because what that spirit did is it changed their experience of their shift, and it also changed the end user's experience of what dinner was like tonight. And in education, we're in a service-oriented profession. So what we want to do is we want to think about, I got all these things I got to do. I can consider them drudgery and I can go about it moaning and complaining and hating it. Or I can remember that I do this so that kids have unbelievable experiences and opportunities in their lives. And so even though it may be a little bit unpleasant, I'm going to go into it with a spirit of positivity and energy and optimism so that that becomes infectious to others, and they see that same joy in the experience. So that's how I've kind of interpreted the know your why. Because in the moment, yeah, the kid's acting like a schmuck and I still have to deal with that. The difference is, how do I go about it? Right. And that's here for each of us. So that's just kind of how I interpret it. And I'll just share that with you. The question about how do we infuse the social emotional learning and how do we infuse character development and that kind of stuff, that has to be done simultaneously, eventually. And I say eventually because you have to explicitly teach the skills. You have to explicitly have the conversation at some point. And so there does need to be some direct instruction on kindness and taking turns and having patience and all the things that we want for kids. How do we work nicely to each other? How do we respond to the word no? We have to have those conversations explicitly, and then we weave them back into everything that we do. And it's so hard for an educator who's got kids who have not ever had that explicit instruction to be able to refer back to that instruction. If it hadn't happened, we can't refer back and say, oh, remember, this is a great opportunity for us to practice our taking turns, or this is a great opportunity for us to handle the response no, or this is a great opportunity for us to wait our turn. So whatever the skill is, it does need to be taught explicitly at some point, and typically that's earlier in the pre-K through 12 experience, so that the teachers from grades whatever on infuse it, use it, refer back to it. And what ends up happening when we don't have that explicit instruction at any given moment is we've got adult educators who have preconceived notions about what kids should know or should be able to do or how they should behave. And nobody likes getting should upon. So what we have is this discord here, this conflict between the teacher's perception of what should be going on in the classroom and what the kids know or don't know yet about how to do that. And so the conversations end up going nowhere when the teacher says, oh, this is a great opportunity for us to take turns. And the kids are like, we don't know how to take turns. We've never learned. So it becomes a conflict. So I do believe there needs to be an initial direct instruction, and then it just needs to be continuously woven through all the interactions we have over the course of the day, the week, the semester, the year, the career.
Yeah, we tend to believe, me as an administrator to my teachers, as well as to my students, and teachers to their students, that I've said it already, so therefore you know it. And we forget that even as a father and husband and all the things, I need constant reminders of this is the expectation and this is how you do it. I want to go back a little bit just because I think it's one of my favorite Simon Sinek teachings. Start with why. I think he kind of made that very popular. But he has a recent one too, into your point of the waiter, waitress, is he said people don't really care about the answer. They care about how you got to the answer. And so his example is if you purchase a flight and you're going to go see your family over Thanksgiving and suddenly you need to change the flight for whatever reason. And you call, and if the person on the other line is, well, you didn't purchase the insurance. I know I didn't purchase the insurance, but I need your help. Is there any way you can change this flight? And they just keep saying, no, you didn't purchase insurance. No, you didn't purchase insurance. The answer is no. You get frustrated. You don't want to use the airline anymore. You have an awful experience. On the flip side, if someone is like, well, did you purchase insurance? No, I didn't purchase it, but can you just try it? Let me try it for you. And they put you on hold. Hey, I couldn't find a way, but I'm going to call my boss really quick. Let me see if I can help you out. They put you on hold again. They come back, maybe a 10-minute conversation. The answer is still no, because you didn't purchase the insurance. But when the one person tries and cares about you and sees you, you'll go to the airline every time. You'll choose them, even though the answer is still no, because of how they tried to serve you. And that's just been a really quality reminder to me, is we tend to believe, and I think this is true, and I'd love for you to tell me if I'm wrong, we tend to believe that the answer is what causes the friction. It's not the answer that causes the friction. It's how we get to the answer that will either erode the friction or continue the friction. Does that sound true?
Yeah, and we see this all the time in schools where it's not the decision that was made that frustrates people. It's how the decision was made or how it was communicated more explicitly that causes friction. And you have a lot of times where, as principal, you have to make decisions. And we don't want to go into Robert's Rules of Order every time we have a faculty meeting or we have to make a decision or we bring the team together or something. But we do want to be explicit about the fact that, hey, there are times, as principal, I've said this, hey, there are times that I have to make the decision. Now, I want to know what y'all think about it before I make my decision. So I'm going to get some input from y'all. I just want you to know I'm going to get your input and then I'm going to make the decision. It's my decision I have to make. There are other times that, hey, I want to get y'all input. And then we're going to follow our consensus building model to make a decision together. We're going to make the decision. It's not my decision, it's our decision we're going to make. Or, hey, I need a committee of folks that are going to come together and they're going to have the conversation. The point being, when we're clear with folks up front about how the decision is going to be made and who's going to make the decision, then when we send out a survey or we ask for input or we have a conversation with somebody about it, or it's a conversation during the faculty meeting, folks know where it's going and they know where the decision originated. And so they're at peace with the process, even if they maybe don't like the end result of the decision itself. And what we as leaders want to do is make sure our people are at peace and understand how things are happening, as opposed to creating a situation in which they don't like the decision and they don't like the way that it was either communicated or came up with. So as leaders, communicate. I can't tell you how many times I have heard stories or even been or led myself conversations in a staff meeting where somebody finally raises their hand and says, "What are we doing with this? Like, we're having this conversation. Where's it going?" And so we've learned in our coaching work and coaching administrators and leaders, be upfront with folks at the beginning and say, "Hey, this is a conversation. Hey, this is a decision we're making today. Hey, this is an advisory group where I'm going to make the decision later." Just clarify for folks before we have the conversation. And then here's the other piece of it. Set a time limit. Like, we're going to talk about this for 10 minutes, or we're going to talk about it until we get to this resolution. Whatever it is, A, clarify exactly what's going to happen, and then B, clarify the parameters of how it's going to go so that folks can then kind of settle in and say, okay, I understand what this journey is going to be like for a little bit. Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
I had a small, just to maybe put some flesh to that. There was a teacher that I asked a couple of years ago for feedback of just like, give me your opinion on this, whatever. And he said, well, you kind of have your decision made already. So why do you ask us? And I said, I appreciate that. That's not always true. And I had to learn kind of what you just said of clarity. And I said, I need to be better at, sometimes the decision is made already, not because it's my decision, even sometimes it's above me. The decision's made already. I want your opinion because I want to know, how do I need to get you to this decision? What frustrations do you have? What roadblocks do you see? And I didn't communicate ahead of time that, guys, this decision's already made. I want your opinion on it because I need to know how to do this or how to navigate it. And I need to be better at that. To your point of, if I'm asking your opinion because you have a real say in the outcome, I need to let you know. If you don't really have a say at all in the outcome and I just want to know your opinions on it, I need to let you know.
Yeah. And then, another piece of that is, as principal and as leaders in the schools, we're middle management, right? So there's certain decisions we kind of get to make, and there's a lot of decisions we don't get to make. And so a lot of that is, how do we take a decision that's been made at the district level or at the state level, the policy level, and bring it back to the staff and say, hey, here's the way it's going to be. And our responsibility is to make the best of it and make sure that it works for kids, make sure it works for us. So how are we going to go about it? And that's kind of that defined autonomy element that we get. Like, you have to stay in the yard. So the district or the state has told you, here's the yard you get to play in. And then while you're in the yard, you get to determine, well, how are we going to do that? And that's the piece that we get to own. To your point, is how do we make the best of this situation? So how are we going to proceed with this and make it amazing?
Yeah, I like that a lot. Casey, you have any last minute thoughts here?
No.
Or questions? All right, I'm going to ask a question. Maybe you guys already went through it, because Pete, in the background, is that a lighthouse that I see? What is that?
Yeah, well, we are in Erie, Pennsylvania. So this is Lake Erie. This is Presque Isle. It's the Presque Isle Bay. Lake Erie's out. They're big. These Great Lakes are big, man.
Yeah.
So
They're pretty great.
They are great homes. So they are. So I'm out here, and I've been doing work with schools. I was in West Virginia earlier this week. I'm in New York later this week. Then I go to Massachusetts after this. So I'm on the road. I'm in a hotel room. I spend a lot of times in hotels, on airplanes, in airports, in rental cars.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, here's my question, because it's I kind of has been noticing it. I have a weird attraction towards lighthouses. There's just
Yep.
something
Okay.
about them that I really appreciate and are fascinated with. And there's something about it too. So like if I can take this analogy of the the lighthouse and all that's around you, you have this giant shore. There's all sorts of warnings on boats about, the shore is coming and the depth is, you're going to run aground here if you keep going. There's all these warnings, all these signs, all these whatever. But yet we still have these lighthouses, which is this very strong piece of architecture that says, no, seriously, like you're getting close.
Yeah.
Um, in your work with principals and your principals mind frames and all that you've done with either in your writing and your thinking and your working with schools, what is one lighthouse piece of advice of, no, seriously, this is what you need to keep in mind as you guide and protect and care for people?
Well, we kind of gone over, I think, what that is, and that is that leadership is about people. And often as leaders, we fall into the trap of looking at the metrics to determine how successful we're being. So, what percentage of our kids are scoring perfect? What percentage gained this? What's our graduation rate? And so we start thinking of it in terms of that as opposed to thinking about people. This is a people business. See, we lead people, we develop people, we build people's capacity, and we're human together. And we got to enjoy this journey together that we're on. And I think that's the lighthouse moment. Interesting that you brought up that metaphor, because if you go back and look at one of the books that I co-authored, it's called The Principal Influence. It's from ASCD's Principal Leadership Development Framework. The cover art kind of is mysterious until someone like me explains it to you that it's actually an aerial shot of a lighthouse, that there's kind of information coming in and there's information going out as far as, hey, here's what's going on around here and here's how we're communicating it to others. So that metaphor does play in the principalship. It does play in educational leadership, absolutely. I think it comes back to people, development of people. That's got to be the thing that anchors or helps us navigate or provides buffers for all of us in this work.
Okay, that has me asking a follow-up question, but what I'm going to do is, Casey and I are going to wrap it up. I'm going to ask you, it's Pete, so that you have some time to think about it, and then that can be our wrap-up question. Is it, if the emphasis is people, and we have these matrix that we still have to follow or at least adhere to show that we're being successful? I could almost use Ted Lasso as an example, where Ted Lasso did not care if he won or lost, if you know the show.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a coach of a soccer team. He did not care if he won or lost. He only cared about the people. And in TV, that really does work. And it works beautifully, and it's convicting, and it's inspiring, and it's all the things. But in life, you can love your people very, very well and have a fantastic culture, whatever that would be. But if you're not successful according to the matrix, you're not doing your job. You're not succeeding. I don't really know the question is, other than can you have a successful people culture and not be successful to the matrix? Or if you are successful with the people, the matrix will come. That's my question to you. Casey, really quick though, what's your takeaway for today?
It's actually on that point. This conversation is reaffirming my belief that if we say that our goal in education is to raise good people who will have amazing lives, and that becomes our focus, I think the rest will take care of itself. Because if we are raising good humans, they will learn to persevere, they will work hard, they will learn how to communicate with others, they will learn what is necessary to care for oneself, and that includes learning a lot of things, that includes doing difficult work. And so I think moving forward, I just want to hang tightly onto that concept that everything that we do in the school is to raise good humans who will have an amazing life.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I loved a lot of things, but I liked this allowance when you said your first question is help me understand, why you this way, help me understand what you want, help me understand. But I do think if you're in any sort of leadership capacity, or if you're just a person who really does care about people, you have the allowance to also say, let me help you. which can come across as maybe pushy or arrogant or all the things that might make somebody feel uncomfortable. But at some point with my children, with my staff, or my bosses with me, they say, I appreciate hearing your perspective and your history. You have gaps. Let me help you fill those gaps. And sometimes we have to be that confident to say that. I appreciate it. Let me help you fix this. So thank you for that, maybe allowance. Okay, Pete, answer to the question. What do you
All right.
think?
Well, interestingly, your summaries, the both of you, kind of went right back to what, Brian, you started off with, which was your son's conundrum and the prayer that you had for your son to have the courage to lead and the courage to be led. And all that agree. So the answer to the question is, I think it comes back to, and I love, Casey, what you said, that if you do a great job of raising kids and preparing kids, they're going to be successful. The metrics will play out. I do believe in that. And I, as a principal, told my staff, don't worry about the standardized test. Don't worry about the scores. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Raise kids, teach kids, do great things for kids, and it will be okay. It will work out just fine. I was taught early in my leadership career about the twin pillars. So high expectations and high support, right? You got the twin pillars that hold you up. So the help me understand and let me help you kind of is an expression of the twin pillars. You're setting high expectations for folks and you're providing a high level of support for folks. The danger in what I've said about how important it is to take care of people is if somebody interprets that as saying, oh, I just want to make sure my people are happy.
Yep.
And I said that about that's what I want for my grandkid, is my grandchild to be happy and at peace. Yeah, I want those things, and I want her to be curious, and I want her to learn, and I want her to be a lifelong learner, and I want her to want to understand things and to figure stuff out. If we just want our people to be happy and we just want things to go smoothly, we probably aren't going to have the impact that we want to have. So we need to have high expectations for what that means for performance, for learning, for collaboration, for data analysis. We set high expectations for all those things, and we provide a high level of support for that simultaneously. I think if we can do that, we and our schools and our communities will thrive.
Thank you, Pete. If people want to get a hold of you, and I can avow that sitting in your classroom for a full day, it was fantastic. It was just as good as this conversation. You're a very real person with very real knowledge, tangible resources. If people want to either reach out to you to get more of your resources or invite you into their schools, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, first of all, thanks for the compliment. I appreciate that. My email address is petehall@educationhall.com. Our website is educationhall.com, and I'm not going to give you all my cell number necessarily, but you probably could find it online pretty easily.
So I can't post that in the show notes?
Yeah, no. But if folks look me up and send me an email, yeah, I tend to respond very quickly to those, and I'm in this work still to support educators and to support education systems. So happy to have the opportunity to chat with you guys today about it.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we appreciate you. Safe travels to you and good luck.
Hey, thanks so much. Enjoyed it as always, and take care.
Thanks, Pete.